my name is Katrina and I'm a pelvic floor physical therapist, and in today's video I'm going to talk all about Kegels and stress urinary incontinence. So if you struggle with urinary leakage with activities like jumping, running, sneezing, coughing, laughing, or any of those activities that increase intra-abdominal pressure in your abdomen, and you struggle with leakage with that, you may have been told I should strengthen my pelvic floor or I should do Kegel exercises. And this is something I commonly hear a lot with my patients, especially those who reach out to me because they reach out saying, I need to do Kegels because I have stress incontinence and I need your help. But in today's video, I'm going to talk about why Kegels may not be the best solution to treating your urinary leakage. So I really wanted to design this video to help explain the anatomy of the pelvic floor and why working on hip mobility and hip rotation strengthening can be a better avenue to treating your urinary incontinence. So I have some notes here that I'll be looking at, but I first wanted to talk a little bit about the anatomy of the pelvic floor. So first of all, Kegels may not be the best solution for treating your incontinence. And the reason why that is because of how your pelvic floor functions. So this is my pelvic model. Your pelvic floor muscles attach from one sitz bones to the other, and then front of the pubic bone all the way back to your tailbone. Your pelvic floor muscles are mostly horizontally oriented. So you have three different layers of your pelvic floor. Your superficial layers help with the continence, so it helps close off the urethra to prevent the pee from exiting. But you also have your deeper pelvic floor muscles, which are also known as your deep glute muscles, which actually help lift up the bladder and support your pelvic organs. So those muscles actually are horizontally oriented. They are attaching from this ischium bone to your sacrum tailbone area, and they're oriented like this. So in order to activate these deep pelvic floor muscles, we can't just be doing a Kegel, because what a Kegel is it's a voluntary contraction in which we just tighten the muscles. I could literally do a Kegel right now, and there's no change in my hip movement. There's no change in whether I'm moving my hip in or out, rotating in or out, flexing up or down. I'm just sitting like this. And a lot of people tend to do Kegels when they're sitting and driving, standing, doing dishes, brushing their teeth. And again, they're just staying in a static position. But our pelvic floor does not function in a static position. Especially when you're laughing, coughing, sneezing, jumping, and running, you're not typically doing those activities just by like staying in one position. Especially running, jumping, hopping, squatting, any of those activities, a lot of those movements actually involve some type of hip movement as well, and it requires you to learn how to load. So if we really want to strengthen the pelvic floor, we can't just be doing Kegels, because again, a Kegel does not work all of the muscle fibers of the pelvic floor. And when it comes to strengthening our deep pelvic floor, again, they are horizontally oriented. So we need to do exercises that target those horizontal fibers. So one of the best movements or directions to help target these horizontal muscle fibers is doing internal and external hip mobility. So this is our hip. I know it kind of snaps, but if we are doing internal rotation, that's this movement. So our hip is moving in. That's going to lengthen the pelvic floor. If we are doing hip external rotation, we should move the hip out. We are shortening the pelvic floor. So hip internal rotation is going to lengthen, create more space, lengthening. External rotation is going to shorten the pelvic floor. And we need both because, again, muscles don't function in a rigid position. If you think about running and jumping, when you land, you don't just land stiffly. You don't just land with keeping your ankle, knees, and hips straight. You actually land by bending at your ankles, bending at your knees, and bending at your hips, because that's how you absorb load. Same thing with jumping on a trampoline. When you land on the trampoline, you typically don't keep your body really stiff. Instead, you allow your body to bend and kind of collapse in a controlled manner to absorb the load. So same thing with the pelvic floor. If these muscles here are very tight, if you don't target these muscles are just going to be like this the whole time. They're super rigid. But in order to train those muscles to work well, we have to learn how to lengthen them, but also contract them. And the movement that is hip internal and external rotation. So another thing I want to point out too is that when you are absorbing load, those muscles actually lengthen. So when you land again, when you land on the ground, it's like a trampoline. Those muscles, when you sink into a trampoline, that trampoline lengthens or it dips. Same thing with the muscles. Those muscles lengthen to absorb load, and then when you jump up from the trampoline, you contract. So it's this lengthen and contract. So same thing here. We need to target learning how to lengthen and then contract. But most people don't have this mobility. Most people are very tight here. Most people, again, are just doing Kegels. So we need to learn how to create some space in these muscles in order to have adequate strength. So I hope that makes a little bit of sense. So again, that's a little bit about the anatomy of the pelvic floor, the importance of muscles lengthening in order to absorb load, and what a Kegel is. And again, what I observe a lot in my clients is that everyone's pelvises are so stiff and rigid. And this is what I commonly see in a lot of pregnant and postpartum clients I see. They have very stiff and tight pelvic floors. They have very stiff hips. They're very locked up in their SI joints. And that's just a common pattern I see. So if you are someone who kind of resonates with that and you've been doing just Kegels, you actually might be making your situation worse, because all you're doing is you're just stiffening everything up even more. So this is why one of the first things I work on if you have urinary incontinence is not Kegels. It's actually working on your hip mobility. And first of all, working on improving your hip internal and external rotation mobility. So how do I know if I have stiff hips, or how do I know if I lack that hip internal rotation? So I will link another video kind of describing like how to know if you have limited hip internal rotation, but I guarantee you 99% of my clients have limited hip internal rotation. So we have to work on that first. So working on your hip internal rotation is actually a very challenging thing to do, because a lot of people find that it feels very like resistant, like they haven't really worked that range of motion. Because everyone's doing external rotation, everyone's doing clamshells, everyone's doing fire hydrants, everyone's putting a band around their knees and trying to activate their glutes when they're doing squats. So that's why I don't really like just external rotation by itself, but again, working on your internal rotation, because again, your muscles need length in order to contract. If your muscles are only functioning in a small range of motion, you're not going to be very powerful. So again, working on your hip internal rotation. And I will link down several videos about how to improve your hip internal rotation and how specific exercises. This is something I definitely talk a lot about on my channel, which is how to improve your hip internal rotation. So again, I will link down the videos for how to improve your hip internal rotation mobility. After you improve that, then you work on strengthening your hip internal rotation. So again, it's not just length, but also strength. And I also will link down some videos on how to strengthen your hip internal rotators. It's really important that when you are strengthening your hip internal rotators, that you are using weights, because if you are running, jumping, coughing, sneezing, that's actually a lot of load on your pelvic floor. So if you are just strengthening with your body weight, it's probably not enough. There was this really interesting fact I found that running places a significant load on the pelvic floor with ground reaction forces ranging from 2.4 to 3.9 times your body weight. So that's why you can't just do body weight exercises. You need to add load, add resistance, add weights, dumbbells, kettlebells, any type of that, or even TheraBands. Again, coughing and sneezing also puts a lot of pressure on their pelvic floor. So that's why you need to focus on also the strengthening component. So I hope that video was helpful. If you have been struggling with urinary incontinence and you've only been doing Kegels, this is your sign to do something else about it. Again, work on your hip internal rotators, specifically your deep glutes, on your mobility and also your strength. And I think that will really help you a lot. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop them below and I'd love to answer them.